All right, good morning and welcome to another episode of Think and Grow Rich Mastermind Live. And my name is Ann McNeil, and I am the Master Wealth Builder, helping to build stronger, better lives and businesses. And I am very excited to be here again today, hosting another episode of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. We are discussing the episode principle, if you will, entitled The Brain. And we have a very special guest with us today, none other than Ms. Dana Bingham. And Dana is the founder of Makita Filmworks, a Brooklyn-based production company that creates narrative films for the screen. She has a degree in film production from Howard University and a master's in video production from New York Institute of Technology. Dana's passion for authentic stories has shaped her unique brand of visually compelling narratives. And I'm going to share a little bit about this principle first, and then we're going to bring Dana on. This principle is entitled the broadcasting and receiving station for thought, which is the brain. It is also considered to be the 12th step toward riches by Napoleon Hill. Now, when we read this and we begin to live these principles, I contend that everything goes back to desire. Napoleon Hill tells us that the brain is considered to be connected to the vibration of our thoughts. And he even calls it a medium by which it is similar to, if you will, a broadcasting principle where every human brain is capable of picking up vibrations of thoughts that's released by other brains and released by, I'll call it the energy, the ether, whatever you want to call it. He goes on to tell us that the creative imagination is considered to be the receiving set of our brain, whereby we receive all thought impressions that moves us to action. But I would continue to suggest that that action goes back to this principle of desire, which is our very first principle. And our guest today is going to share with us her experience in relations to this principle. Good morning, Dana. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Anne. Thank you so much for having me back again.
Yes, well, remember now, some individuals did not know you were here before, so we're going to go back and do a rewind, if you will,
Yeah.
and begin by sharing a little bit about your story. And then if you would share, how did you come in contact with this book, this tome, this philosophy? And we'll start digging into the impact that it has had, is having, and potentially shall have on you. So take us back to a little bit about your beginning, please.
Well, in the long story short, I've always had a passion for storytelling and even as a child, and which led me to Howard University studying film. And later on, I had a amazing internship at 40 Acres and a Mule, Spike Lee's production company, where I met my mentor, Rod Gales, OBC. And that guided me into a 14-year long career in program planning and strategy at Nickelodeon. And like most people, were impacted by company restructures in the pandemic. I was laid off, but my foresight years prior to that led me to deciding to dust off my creative skills and get back into film production. And I started my own production company. Um, and of course, that has a lot of growing pains, but trying to figure out yourself and what it is that you're actually passionate about. But I stead the course, and I'm still on that course as an entrepreneur. But I stumbled across well, not necessarily stumbled across, my brother Galen Bingham, who's also one of the hosts on the show, um, asked me to join one of his cohorts to read the book Think and Grow Rich. And I heard the title, but didn't really know much about it. We spent about 10 weeks diving into each of the principles each week. Um, and I was reading it, not necessarily connecting to it. It was more of like, let me read this. I'm a part to be a part of the conversation. So it was processed as if I was in school and you're trying to get your final grade. Not knowing that this was actually like, a tool that could actually help me in my business and in life, not just business, but in life. So yeah, I recently, maybe about a month ago, picked it up because I'm in this transition of trying to figure out, what is it that I want to do with my life. And as we embark into the new year, that is always the forethought of like, oh, new year, new me. But I truly wanted to dive in and analyze and kind of make positive change because what was working before is not working now. So I needed a guide. And so I've been reading almost a chapter a day and really trying to connect. I got me a little highlighter. I'm highlighting passages that really, speak to um, where I'm at in my journey.
Wow. Well, what we're going to do is we are going to take a moment and look at the entire 13 principles. And as we begin to delve into this one particular principle uh, entitled The Brain, we're going to discuss how do you use the principle to activate your brain. And so we're going to ask everybody to please remember to comment, like, and share. Also subscribe to the YouTube, but also put your questions in the chat on YouTube if you have any questions for either one of us. But also pull out your book and follow along with us, because it's one thing to sit and listen, but it's something else to be actively involved. And so we're going to listen to these 13 principles, and all of the principles connect to each other. So as you think about how does this impact you, it is amazing how these principles, and we talked about that a little bit, Dana, about the fact that these principles, we use them, but we don't necessarily call them what he does. So listen.
Number one is desire. Napoleon Hill said that everything starts with a burning desire, a compelling reason for doing what it is we do. Step two is faith, having belief in our ability to attain that which we desire. Step three is what we call autosuggestion. Autosuggestion simply means being very intentional about the things that we are pouring into our thoughts, into our brains, and into our consciousness. Our brains, our minds will receive everything automatically, but we have to work extra hard to make sure that the positive things are what we are feeding ourselves, because those positive thoughts are going to turn into positive actions. Step number four is specialized knowledge. No one person knows everything, even about whatever their particular area of expertise might be. And the value of the Mastermind principle is using the specialized knowledge of other people. Step number five is imagination, the workshop of the mind. Everything starts with our imagination and our thoughts, the burning desire to transform those thoughts into our reality. In order to do that, we have to take a look at step 6, which is organized planning. That is how we crystallize our desire into action, organizing ourselves. Having the thought and not acting on the thought isn't going to get us anywhere. We have the thought, we go through the organized planning to transform that thought into action. Step number 7 is decision. What Napoleon Hill said is the mastery of procrastination. Napoleon Hill said that the antidote to procrastination is simply to make a decision and then move on that decision. Step 8 is persistence. We have to have a sustained effort which is induced by our faith in order to achieve our goals. One of Napoleon Hill's books I love, even the title, 3 Feet from Gold. Those people who became rich during the gold rush in the wild, wild west days didn't do that because they were necessarily smarter or had better information than anyone else. It's because they stayed just a little bit longer. Sometimes people left when they were just literally 3 feet from gold. So hanging in there, being persistent, is step number 8. Step number 9, the power of the mastermind, the driving force. None of us can accomplish anything on our own. Everybody, I don't care who you are, from the most prominent person to the person who might be considered the lowest on the totem pole, everybody has someone who helped them get to where they are. And the power of the mastermind is being able to use those influences around us, use the thoughts, use the knowledge, use the exploration of other people to help us in achieving our goal. Step number 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. This title can be a little confusing, but essentially what the mystery of sex transmutation means is that we oftentimes in our society think of sex as being purely physical. It is absolutely physical, but what Napoleon Hill teaches us is that sex also has an emotional element, and that sex is the strongest of our desires. That if we can take our sexual energy, transform that into positive, creative influences, it can propel us to new heights. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about the mystery of Step 10, which is sex transmutation. Step number 11 is the subconscious mind, which Napoleon Hill tells us is the connecting leap between our human mind and the infinite intelligence, the source of all thought, the source of all creativity. Conscious mind, we spent some time talking about how we use that through the influence of autosuggestion and what we're feeding into our mind. Step number 12, which is the brain, the broadcasting and receiving station of thought. Final step number 13, the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. This is the final step through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. The principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles.
All right. And there are the principles, the 13 principles. And what I'd like to go to there is a section that Napoleon Hill shares where he shares with us how do you actually activate, if you will, how do you actually activate the principle? And what I'd like to challenge each of us to do, if you have your book with you, if you go to the 13 principles and you go all the way to the very last couple of pages, if you will, and I'm going to actually read it from my book so I can get it right, because I think that this really sets up how we can actually activate these principles. Napoleon Hill shares, he said, and this is on page 225 if we're using the same version. He says that the principle, the procedure is very simple on how do you activate, right, your mind. He said the procedure is simple. We sit down at a conference table. We clearly state the nature of the problem we have under consideration. Then we begin discussing it. Each contributes whether thoughts, each contributes whatever thoughts that may occur. The strange thing about this method of mind stimulation is that it places each participant in communication with unknown sources of knowledge definitely outside of his or her experience. Then the last paragraph, he goes on to say, if you understand the principle described in chapter 9 on the mastermind, you of course recognize the round table procedure here described as being a practical application of the mastermind. This method of mind stimulation through harmonious discussion of definite subjects among three people illustrates the simplest and most practical use of the mastermind. And I wanted to read that because all of these principles connect to each other. And when you stop and think about how do you activate your own mind, I would challenge each of us to start with the mastermind principle itself. Sitting, and then of course we know we're in a virtual world, but as we sit and discuss whatever the issues or problems are, then that begins to activate your brain to bring into realization that which you desire. And I'll give a personal example. In 1979, December 31st, 9 p.m., when I started reading the book, and I got to page 28, that basically said, Ann McNeil, and you can place your name in the statement, how much money do you want? I never thought about it. So as I began to read more over the years, and as I began to form my first mastermind group in 1980, we would sit and do exactly what this principle shares. We would sit, everybody would bring one question, and that was, how much money did you want? And as we would discuss ideas and thoughts around that table with each other about how we could support each other in the brain, some people call it brainstorming. Napoleon Hill does not really call it that. But as you activate each other's mind, a third, fourth, fifth mind appears. And that mind, brain, infinite intelligence, whatever you want to call it, the spirit, whatever you want to call it, it will bring into that space exactly what that individual needs to go to the next step. Not a big step, but a very small step. And so creative imagination, as we know, and the subconscious mind, as we know, is also a part of this activating your brain. So now that we have that backstory and we've had the 13 principles and we see how they connect, now we're going to come back to our special guest and we're going to ask Dana if you can share, right? And I took some notes from the conversation we were having prior, but if just start off by sharing what resonated with you most about this principle of the brain and how you can now begin to connect it with your own personal experiences.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, if I one of the things that I kind of really highlighted was that the subconscious mind is the sending station of the brain through which thought impulses are broadcast. You know, for me as a creative and working in television, you automatically have that image in your mind of, you know, television and information, how that information is sent. So that kind of helped me dive in that, you know, it's what you tell yourself. One thing we were talking about, you know, aside from professional, personally, many years ago, I used to be an amateur boxer. And I remember my coach used to always say, your mind is your strongest muscle. And it didn't register until, you know, we started working out. And I realized that I have to tell myself, I'm going to get stronger. I want to do this. I am a boxer. And it makes me think of Muhammad Ali. You know, he always said, I'm the greatest. But he wasn't saying that to be, you know, cocky and boisterous. He was actually saying that for himself. He was saying that to, you know, give his best self, to tap into his conscious mind. So when he get in there and alleviate the doubt. So, you know, we're human. We get up and we're like, oh, you know, I'm gonna have a bad day. We're telling our brain we're gonna have a bad day. So our brain is saying, okay, let's send all these emotions, let's send all these, thoughts of why you should have a bad day. I recently saw this interview clip with Diana Ross, and she said, I can say I am going to be successful. And she's like, and then my brain will say, no, you're not. And she said, but I have the power to decide whether or not I want to succumb to those negative thoughts. And that is the challenge. We have to exercise our brain to think positive thoughts. And it's an everyday actionable thing. It's not easy to do. But it's also, it's what we learn through the journey of like, okay, how do we trick our mind or exercise these muscles to think positive thoughts, because that intel directs us to, what our highest purpose is supposed to be. We have to tell ourselves these things, tap into our subconscious. And that's repeatedly saying over and over, oh, I am this, I am that. And that's where the affirmation statement is very important. If you repeat over and over, okay, this is how much I want by this time, then you'll start, activating that subconscious thought of, okay, how do I do that? And so you're creatively thinking about all these different ways of accomplishing your goals. It's not easy. I'm reading this book for the second time. So clearly, I'm trying to still, tap into, you know, these principles in a way that really is helpful. Um,
Well,
yeah, I think that's where um it applies for me.
well, I want to go to something that Wyman put in the chat on YouTube. He said, answering the question, how much money do you want, will change the path your life takes and intensify and the intensity of your efforts, but only if you create a course of intention to achieve your goal. That is so powerful. Thank you so very much, Wyman. And Shayna, good morning. Good morning. Shayna says, yes, creatives seem so attuned to this. Thank you. Thank you. And of course, Genevieve says, yes, I saw the previous interview with Dana. It was great. Thank you, everybody, for chiming in. When you go back to the conversation that you had initially in the mastermind group, do you recall any kind of aha moments that now tend to resonate with you a little bit more because of going through it the second time? And then I want to go back to something you shared about this is hard.
Yeah, yeah. The mastermind group was 2 years ago. So because I wasn't really truly connecting with the book in the true form as I should have been at the time, it's almost like a passing thing. I did it, you check it off your list. I did it, and I've attend this thing, I shared my thoughts, and you go on about your day. So for me, going through this now, it's like, oh man, I wish the mindset that I had now, I had it back then. Hindsight is 2020. So we can only just tap into what we've learned now and experiences, and change your course moving forward.
Yeah, first of all, I want to encourage you in the fact that we're all exactly where we need to be. And you talk about the second time, and for many of us, and I know Wyman and many of us are part of many different mastermind groups. I actually host a mastermind group called Clarity Mastermind. And if any of you are interested in participating with us in that, you can just go to annmcneil.com and /coaching. You'll get the details there. But I want to go back to your point about this is hard. I want to encourage all of us to remember that our subconscious mind does not know the difference between true or false. It only knows what we tell it over and over and over and over again. And then I want to go back to the beginning of the principle where Napoleon Hill tells us about when he introduces this concept of the brain. He says, he tells us that vibrations of an exceedingly high rate are the only vibrations picked up and carried by the ether from one brain to another. And whatever we say, whether it's true or false, it doesn't matter. Our brains are picking it up. Whatever others say to us, about us, if we're hearing it, we're picking it up. So maybe we want to look at another word we can use versus hard. It's interesting, it's exciting, it's a challenge, because whatever we say, let's go back to what you said about Diana Ross and how she switched that. So there's a book that I like promoting on this podcast. It is called Conscious Language, the Logos of Now, which basically speaks to what we say and the power of our words. Well, we know the other book says, that life and death is in the power of our tongue. So I just want to just kind of come back to that, Dana, because you're doing very well with the second, and you're going to be have a third time and a fourth and a fifth. But just be mindful though that the universe is picking it up. I'm going to go back to what he shared about the fact that the creative imagination, you shared this, is receiving, through which the vibrations of thoughts are picked up from the ether, but also that the operations of this mental broadcasting station it's a very simple procedure, and we don't think about it as being simple, right? He said you have 3 principles of the 13 principles. You have 3 to take into consideration when you consider this broadcasting station. The first one is your subconscious mind. The second one is your creative imagination. And then the third one is autosuggestion. All of those are impacting our brain. The subconscious mind, what is your desire? What are you sending it subconsciously and subliminally? And I think that's why advertisers get paid not billions, but trillions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
The subconscious mind, and then creatively, how do we process that, right, as we receive it? And then what is the autosuggestion that we're using to program the subconscious mind through the affirmation? Many of us is a part of my Clarity Mastermind, not many of us, all of us, because the whole Clarity Mastermind is about self-confidence. So we have memorized and we recite and we listen to the self-confidence formula that's in this book, and we do it every day. Yes, 30 days. And there's a challenge. No, really, I have a challenge that goes on every 30 days. And we have exercises that we do, but one of them that we do is to listen, recite, and or read that self-confidence formula. Why? Because basically it says, I know that I have the ability to achieve the object of my definite purpose in life. Therefore, I demand of myself persistent, continuous action toward its attainment. I can go on. That's another podcast. But my point is this: subliminally, we are being impacted by what we intentionally program our minds, our brains, or we allow unintentionally others to program. So can you think of an instance or a situation where you have intentionally tapped into your own brain? And as a creative, you have many examples of how you've tapped into your own brain and you've asked it to give you something and it did exactly what you desired.
Ooh. I mean, I think that's what the challenge is, right? We, as a creative, we make stuff and we try not to be, once it's complete, we move on to the next thing. And I think that is what the challenge as a creative is. It's like you feel like oh, I made this thing. I've finished it. Okay, how do I make the next thing? What is it? So that is where you're in your brainstorming with yourself, and you're like, oh, is this a good idea? Can I make this? My focus is I'm an editor. Kind of fell into that position, but I try to tap into all facets of production. But my niche is documentary. So my draw is always, okay, what is the interesting story? What is it that I'm learning? Is this going to be interesting to someone else? Will it educate them? Will it give them that aha moment or whatever? So it's always, that's where I'm tapping in. And sometimes the ideas come easily because it's something that I want to learn. And you're always learning through the process of creating. Or it's something that someone comes to me and be like, this is the story I want to tell. And then all of a sudden you have to embody the same passion and desire for that content as your client. So I think that is, a general scope for me is getting from the thought idea, the general conception of what it is that I want to create and the thoughts around that. And then when I've determined, okay, I want to do a documentary on my mentor or his work. The process of making it is fun because then in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about the reason why I'm doing it. So that you're not thinking, okay, I'm going to exercise my brain and tap into my subconscious. You're not really, just sitting there and thinking it's just an automatic process that flows, and you don't even realize until you sit and read this book, and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm automatically doing this. Um, and then you give yourself a little credit from there when you realize that you are putting these principles into practice and you don't even realize it. You just need to like structure or tweak, or as you were mentioning, change the language that you're using to make the next project even better or even more enjoyable or exciting. So
All right, well, we have a couple of comments in the chat, so I'm going to read. Geneva Renee says, how does someone activate the brain to think positively about abundance when your eyes see so much negativity and lack? And I think that a part of what we shared going back to principle 1, which is desire. And once you come up with whatever it is you desire statement, and Genevieve, I'm not sure if you have the book, but if you can just go to Google if you don't, and you can Google on Napoleon Hill's 6 Steps to Riches. Well, actually, I'll put in the chat. If you text 55678, 55678, and you put the word "and" in the chat, I'll send you. But the questions are inside of what Napoleon Hill shares. He said, if you create an affirmation statement, and this is the answer to your question. If you create an affirmation statement that says how much money you want, answer these questions. How much? That's number 1. Number 2 is, what are you going to do to make the money? Number 3 is, by what date do you want the money by? Number 4, he states, create a plan, something very short. Number 5, he states you would make that into an affirmation statement. And then number 6, you're going to recite it twice a day. Now, I contend, and this is my answer to the question because this is what I do. When I focus on what I want more than what I don't want, because my eyes can see the negativity and the lack and what's not going to happen. But when I put my focus on what I do want, and I'll say this again and again and again, it's not always about the money, but it's who we become on the journey to get the money, right? So whatever it is that you desire, that positive statement that you're reciting has a way within your mastermind group, because you should have an accountability group or partner or something to help hold you accountable for your goals. I contend that regardless of what your eyes can see in terms of negativity, your eyes will begin to focus more on that which is positive and less on that which is negative. Because remember, like attracts like. Like attracts like, and whatever we give energy to, that is what will grow. So thank you so very much for the question. Wyman says, I believe we're all creatives. Why? We're created in the image, likeness of the creator. It took creativity to get a man to the moon and back. Creativity is used in every vocation to achieve greatness. Thank you, Wyman. And Shane Tate shares, those vibrations are words. That's why saying is so powerful. And the word is bond. Opportunity is a word. I switched for problem in following an example of a good friend. Wow, thank you. That is powerful. And then Wyman, thank you also again. He said, break it. All right, Wyman, break it down, Master Builder and my friend. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. We want to just make sure that we share with you the opportunities that we come on every weekend. Good morning again, Doretha, too. Welcome to the podcast. We also want to just make sure we continue to share with you these principles, because again, for many of us, it is not so much about the negative, if you will, because as we every Saturday continue to send positive into the world, at least 1 hour every week, many lives have been changed and positively impacted by what we're doing here, especially when we have phenomenal guests. And so we're going to come back to our phenomenal guests. And oh my goodness, the time is quickly moving. I want to also have you to share about how do you we talked earlier about how do we neglect the brain. You gave some very powerful comments about how, coming into the realization of how to use your brain now. Can you share with us some examples of how you now realize how you have been neglecting how to use your own brain?
I think at times when I feel stagnant, so that's really what got me into the book the second time around. I was feeling stagnant. There was no kind of forward movement in my business. So I knew that, okay, whatever I'm doing, what I know to do, I need to change that. So how do you do that? Well, you become a student. Again, you have to be a student. And you have to be able to realize that you don't know everything. And I guess that is the prime example of, I'm at this stage right now. I don't consider myself a master of knowing all things television and film and editing and everything. I'm always learning. I'm always challenging myself to say, yes, I can do it. I might not know how to do it, but that's how you have to exercise your brain. You have to force yourself to learn. I say all of this, yes, to help someone else, but it's also helping myself, because sometimes if you don't say it out loud, you're thinking it, if you're thinking the thoughts, it's always a competition between the negative and the positive in your head, right? It's back to what I was saying about Diana Ross. So, in my mind, I'm like, oh, I want to do XYZ, but you come up with a million excuses and things like that. But when you have to say it out loud and actually verbalize it, that changes the way you're mentally processing everything. So I think that's for me, it's just realizing I'm a student and I don't know anything, and tapping those people who know, like you were mentioning, mastermind group, your mentors, people who may consider no more than you. I think he gave the example of Ford, I believe it was in the book, where he didn't have a college education. He only had a high school education, and he tapped the people around him to help him build a successful business. So, the famous quote, "No man is an island." I realized that I'm not in this by myself, although it may feel like it, I am. I have to continue to challenge that thinking, that way of thinking.
Well, that's powerful, because again, as you share, and you hit the nail on the head, really, because like you said, as you share, excuse me, as you share with others, and I think it's somewhere in the beginning of the book, Napoleon Hill tells us, if you have a problem, the best way to solve it is find other people with the same problem. Wait a minute now, that was me.
Because I was like, what part of the book is that in?
No, really, no. It is in the first couple of chapters. Basically, what he's saying is, but I've read so many of his books, probably about a good 10 or 15 somewhere in it. But the point is this: when you mastermind and you're identifying a problem that you have, because that's really what this whole premise is about. The last thing I read about the roundtable discussion is about bringing a problem to the table, and sharing that problem with other minds, and helping to tap into the brains of others to solve your problem. But when I said that, going to the point you made, when you said, well, as I share with other people, I'm helping myself. I went back to 1979, 80, 81, 82, and I began to realize my problem was financial. And as I had other friends who had the same problem, as we came together to solve our individual situations, we helped each other. And this is one of the reasons why right now, today, many of us have been together for over 40 years, masterminding, and as a group. And I'll just transition now into our annual meeting. So we are hosting our annual meeting in Pompano Beach, Florida, at True by Hilton on January 5th and 6th. And I would encourage all of you to go to internationalmasterminders.com, and I'll put that link in the chat in YouTube. Or if any of you would be willing to help a sister out, just type that in there. But anyway, January 5th and 6th, 2024, we will hold our Think and Grow Rich International Mastermind annual meeting for your life. This is not a conference. There's no keynote speaker. There's no conference bags. No, you are the corporation of your business called your life. And you will be sitting at a table with about 4 or 5 people, and everybody gets to go around and share what did they accomplish last year and what are your goals for this year. And when I tell you, a very revealing exercise, it is simply amazing the things we say and the things we write, but then we don't have a way of being held accountable all year long. And I am challenged just like everybody else, because I have a lot of lofty goals. But the accountability, we meet every Monday, our accountability group. Doretha and I are in the same group. There's 6 of us, 52 weeks. We meet every Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern time. And we rotate and go around and share our goals in preparation for the end of the year. That is what we do at the annual meeting. We all come together. Wyman's on here, Doretha's on here. Many of them have come. Well, no, they always come. Excuse me. They always come. It is amazing when you see the children, you see families. And this was something that I was blessed by God to create with a wonderful group of individuals, because I could not find a place where I could go to have total accountability for my entire life. So I can go to church and get spiritual accountability. I can go to my construction associations and get, accountability for my trade. I can go to business conferences like Chambers and get accountability for my business. You know, I can go to the gym association and group and get accountability for my health, you know, exercise. I can go to the doctor and be held accountable for my, you know, exams. But where do I go? There's one place to be accountable for the spiritual goals I set, the family goals I set, the financial goals I set, the health goals. How about that? How about that education goal? You know, to learn how to do a funnel, or to learn get certification as a licensed general contractor. What about those education goals? What about the personal development goals? What about the business or professional goals? How about recreation, creativity, and civic giving, serving, sharing? So that's what we do. And these are all written. We set these goals, preferably, well, I do for 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And right now I'm in my 40 plus year from goals I set 40 years ago. That's what we do. And I'll challenge and encourage all of you, join us in Pompano Beach, Florida's Hilton by True by Hilton. Yes, True by Hilton, January 5th and 6th, 2024. And you can go to the International Masterminders.com and you can see the details there. But Dana, I want to come back to you and have you share if there's any particular product or service, something that you have that you would like for people to connect with you. And then we're going to come back to the questions.
Well, people can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Makita Film Works. That's where you can just tap into all the things that I'm creating and all the collaborators I'm working with. If you want to see some of my work, I was an additional editor on the most recent doc series on Netflix called Ladies First, a story of women in hip hop, as well as assistant editor on the Why Not Us Gremlin Dance season, which is on ESPN Plus. So.
Awesome. And could you please put all of that in the chat on YouTube when you get a chance, because many people will listen and they would love to follow. And oftentimes, you know, after this podcast is over, people continue to listen. So we're going to ask everybody, if you have not subscribed to the YouTube, please do so now. Doretha, thank you for your comment. She says, by using and feeding our subconscious mind powerful, positive affirmations each day, we change our way of thinking. Thank you so much, Doretha. Doretha, if you don't mind, could you also drop the Facebook link in the chat so that individuals can join our Facebook group? And if you've not joined and you're listening to us, all of you that's on here today, Shane, Genevieve, Geneva, Renee, everybody, please remember to subscribe and also join the group. Now, let's come back to the questions. Any special section or aha that you'd like to share? Because this is a deep, deep, deep principle. And I know we had some healthy, lively conversations before we started. And what we usually do as co-hosts, we say, wait, say that. Because if you say it now, you're not going to remember. So are there any particular aha moments or takeaways that you want to share from the principle that we've not discussed so far?
I mean, I think I mentioned before, it's just remembering when I was training to be an amateur boxer, my coach saying that your mind is your strongest muscle, basically. So just keeping that was the aha that I had. Because now years later, I'm like, now I understand, because he would speak in these different little almost like little phrases, things like that, motivational statements. Now I get it. And it's just remembering that in order to do whatever it is that you're trying to do, you have to exercise your brain. It is the strongest muscle. It's not how much you can lift. It's not how far you can run. It's not, how fast you can type. It's not any of these things without your brain. So I think that is my biggest takeaway and biggest aha, that I just, after reading the chapter, I just kept saying, wow, okay, yeah, it surely is your strongest muscle.
Oh, I think we need to tweak that. Can you put that in the chat? I'm multitasking here, but oh my goodness, that is so powerful. And it's interesting how much time and energy do we invest in exercising that muscle?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And that really is, I think, the crux of this particular podcast. Just to share something else Napoleon Hill tells us, he said that going back to how we think, right? Um, he talks about the depression and how it brought everybody basically to the knees, and how um, the minds really just kind of went to the negative. And I think it goes to a question that was asked early in the chat. But these forces, and just think about it, they're intangible.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can see the physical exercise, like you're saying, of the body. But how do you exercise the brain, the mind? And I'll just share with you how I exercise my brain. I use my affirmation, but I also have what I call a daily date with myself. And I promised myself that every Saturday I was going to promote my book here. It's called How to Start and Run a Successful Mastermind Group. It's the McNeil Factor. How to Start and Run a Successful Mastermind Group. But as a part of that process, I created what I call a daily date with myself. And this is how I exercise my brain. So I have certain exercises that I do, mental, every morning. And it connects to the clarity work that I do. But it starts with my affirmation, meditation, prayer, right? We're lifting weights, we're exercising the brain that Dana just shared. But also, I ask I have a journal that I call my daily date with myself journal. It's a journal, but I actually write, what am I thankful for? Just a couple of things. What am I grateful for? Maybe a couple of things. What are some lessons learned from yesterday? Just a couple of things. But then I get down to the bottom of the page and I write from 1 to 10, and I ask my brain, the spirit, my mind, the universe, to give me 10 opportunities. 10. I don't always get 10. I might get 5. I might get 2. I might get 15. But I do this exercise every single day. Yes, 7 days. So we travel, flights. Yes, why? Because as I begin to do that, I am now experiencing the realization of things that I wrote 30, 40 years ago, because it's like it is a muscle, like a muscle. I exercise it every day. And so we talked about creatives. You're exercising your brain, you're exercising the creativity. But I just think that once we begin to go deeper into this concept, and I go back to the depression continued because the negative news, the negative talk, and all of the things that was going on around that time, it was intangible. We experienced many similar kinds of depressions of the mind and the spirit, if you will, when COVID happened, 9/11 happened, the housing crisis happened, but especially when COVID happened, because it gave many people time to get off the treadmill and begin to think about these intangible forces. We didn't call them that, but think about, what is it that you truly desire? What is it that you really want? Because many of us stay on our jobs forever, and we go to that island called one day one day I'll leave my job. One day I'll start a business. One day I'll be financially free. One day I'll go back to school and get that degree. One day I'll take care of my parents. One day, and then you look up, and that one day has come to say it's time to leave. And so I just want to just continue to encourage all of us to continue to think about, how do you use your brain? And Dana has shared some excellent, excellent, excellent information and advice. The book will read you if you allow it. It will read you if you allow it to do so. So Dana, as we prepare to wrap up, any kind of closing comments or thoughts that you have that you'd like to
I mean, look, like I mentioned before, I'm at a transition, as many of us are, and utilizing this book to help you plan your goals is a great tool. I'm a planner girl. I love a new planner for the year. But as I'm asked these questions of what are your goals, what is it that you want? I'm like, oh, how do I even do that? So I think having this book next to me as I, plan what my new goals are and all these what I want to achieve in the new year is such a a new a new approach for me that I never even thought about. And so I'm really happy that I've taken on reading this book for a second time, and I'll probably read it again every year just to kind of get me a new give me new insight into what it is that I really want, my highest, you know, helping me achieve my highest purpose. Um, I think that's my my last thoughts.
All right, all right, all right. Well, we're going to go ahead and plan to wrap up. And I really want to thank you, Dana, for being willing to share, because I think that you've already come to realize that this is not as tough as we may think. So we want to encourage all of you who are listening in that if you'd like to be a part of our podcast, I'll give my number for lack of a better way to reach us. My number is 786-546-0184, 786-546-0184. You can reach out to me, and I always like to change my name on the podcast to you can text text the number 55STEXT, text 55678. And in the chat, you can just put the word and that's another way to connect with me. But I also want to encourage you, join us every Saturday. Subscribe to the YouTube, join us, participate in the conversation, because this is where we come, some of us, and be held accountable at least once a week. Dana, I'm going to challenge you once we get off to join us. We also do a Friday accountability call. We do a lot of different things. So if you go to annmcneil.com, we can share that information there. But I really want to thank all of you for coming on today. It has been an inspirational, encouraging, and fun, Dana.
Yes. Yes.
And we want to tell your children that we are so thankful and grateful that they were so well behaved today, because they picked up your spirit from the universe. And that, we're laughing is that's another podcast. We go there, because this whole idea of broadcasting and receiving is not just limited to humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll leave that there, because animals can be so perceptive.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, they can be so perceptive. But that by itself can be another podcast, because we would blow up this podcast when you start, asking people to share stories of how their animals pick up their spirit. How
Yeah.
do you explain that? And there's no real way to explain it until you start delving into this conversation and this particular principle about the brain. And next week, we will talk. Yes, I'll be here next week. The guys are off. And so unless somebody else want to come on, Wyman or anybody else, I might be by myself. Either way, we will be here. So if any of you want to come on, a lot of you want to come on, we can do 4 or 5, whatever it is, but we will be here. So let me say that. And we will be talking about infinite intelligence, because it will wrap up all of these 13 principles. And the more I do this, the more I realize I don't know. I really don't know very much about this. I really don't. And so because I don't know, and I don't profess to know, I just stay in the book, this book and that other book. But anyway, so everybody, we're going to say good day. Have a great holiday weekend, and please be safe. And remember to continue to to grow richer. And that is the ending of our podcast for today. And that is our show outro. Dana. All right, everybody, have a good day. See you
Thank
later. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.